Today is Tuesday, November 30th, 2010, around 2:40 p.m. in the afternoon. We are at the home of James Billingslea at Carroll Lutheran Village in Westminster, Maryland. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
Good. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and just have an interview of what your life has been like here in Carroll County. So, how old are you?
86.
86. And were you born in Maryland?
Yes.
Were you born here in Westminster?
Not in the city, but on the outskirts.
Okay. Okay. And where have you lived throughout your life?
Other than World War II, in Carroll County, I did go to school near Hagerstown at a prep school called St. James School.
Okay.
And I was a boarding student.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how old were you when you completed school there?
18.
Okay. Okay, so what has made you want to stay in Carroll County as long as you have?
Business opportunity. My father had an insurance agency, and he invited me to come into the business with him shortly after World War II, and I stayed in that business until I retired. He was just in the insurance business, but after I was there 2 or 3 years, I added the real estate business to the agency.
Okay. And what happened with the business once you retired?
My son now has it,
Okay.
James Billingslea Jr.
Okay. Wonderful.
And his son, my grandson, is finishing college this year, and he plans to go with his father.
So it's going to stay in the family then?
Yes, it appears that way, unless the real estate business completely collapses.
Okay. So can you tell me what your life was like growing up here in Carroll County?
Well, it became much quieter after I met my wife Caroline and got married. Prior to that, I was like any young blade who liked to party and so forth. But that ended with my marriage, and I settled down, and we have 2 children.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been married to your wife?
59 years.
Wow. Okay. And your 2 children, can you tell me more about them?
Well, as I said, my son now has the agency, James Billingsley Jr., whose nickname is Jamie. And my daughter works for the state of Maryland out of Baltimore now, or Towson, I believe, Towson. She's with the employment department. And my son has 2 children, a boy and a girl, and my daughter has 2 girls. Both of the girls have finished college.
Okay. Wonderful. What part of Carroll County did you primarily grow up in? Like, where did your family live?
Westminster, the Westminster area.
Okay. What have been some of the biggest changes in the county throughout your entire time here?
Well, the growing population has been steady. So I kind of joke sometimes when I went into the Navy and served on an aircraft carrier, there was as much crew with the air group that I was in on the carrier in numbers of people that lived in Westminster.
Wow.
Back at that time, I think Westminster was about 3,000 people.
Okay. What changes have you seen in terms of the industry throughout the county?
I'm not too sure about the industry. Of course, Black & Decker came in with a nice plant, and that has moved, I believe, to North Carolina. And I'm not that familiar really with the industries that have come in, and some of those that have left.
Okay.
With Black & Decker, did you notice like any change economy-wise when they came in and then when they left?
Not really. One of my wife's brothers works for Black & Decker. He's now retired, and he moved from the Westminster area to North Carolina and worked at the plant down there.
To follow Black & Decker when they moved?
Mm-hmm.
And is he still there?
He's still in North Carolina. He's retired. He had the choice of going to Eastern Maryland. I can't remember the name of the town, but the housing was so much more expensive than it was in North Carolina. Actually, he could buy twice the house for half the price in North Carolina than here in Westminster. Now he's interested in moving back, and he has the reverse situation. He can buy half the house for twice the price.
Okay, so that would be an example of the economy and the changes going on. What changes have you seen in terms of the community throughout the county? So people as a whole.
Well, there are a lot of very active organizations, the service clubs and activities associated with the schools, which have been very active. And that's stayed pretty constant in all the years that I've been here.
Okay. How old were you when you signed up to serve?
In the Navy?
Yes.
Well, I was 18 and received a draft notice, so I didn't have any choice. And I went down to the 5th Regiment Armory to report with 4 or 5 other Carroll County boys. And we went into this huge 5th Regiment Armory, and we looked around, and there were these desks located, and it was Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marines, and all of us said, I don't want to go in the Army. We all went over and enlisted in the Navy. So we were known as selective volunteers, meaning that we were in under the Selective Service Act, and we volunteered to go in the Navy. And we had to sign for the duration of the war plus 6 months. That was our commitment.
Okay.
So if the war lasted 4 years, we were in 4 years and 6 months. If it lasted 8 years, like the one has, or 9 in Afghanistan, we'd have been in 9 years and 6 months.
Okay.
Scary, isn't it?
Yes, it is. How did that make you feel at 18, having to sign up for that?
At 18, well, I had to sign up, and when you're 18, it was an adventure going into the service.
Yeah. And what was it like serving for those 4 years?
Well, I went to, of course, boot camp, and from there I went down to Tennessee to the Naval Air Technical Service Center, and from there I became an aviation ordnanceman and was assigned several different bases, and then ended up going to Hawaii and serving on an aircraft carrier. And I was on the carrier when the war ended.
Okay. And were you married before you left?
Oh, no. No. And I didn't have a girl in every port.
Okay. So you met your wife after you came back?
When I was playing softball, fast-pitch softball down behind the Armory in Westminster, and she came sashaying along the sidewalk there, and I spotted her, and I was introduced to her. And things then went from there to marriage.
Okay. The changes that have occurred in Carroll County through your entire lifetime here, how did those changes affect your family's way of life, or did it?
What I probably saw the biggest changes were in the real estate business, because when I started the real estate portion of the agency, if you wanted to buy a house in Carroll County or Westminster, you needed 40% of the price of the house. Now, of course, then $15,000 to $20,000 was a pretty nice house. And then I saw things change over a period of years. Of course, when the 40% was required, the price of houses was very level. It didn't change much. Then Baltimore Federal came into, well, actually, before that, Maryland had a usury law that you couldn't charge, banks couldn't charge more than 6% for a home mortgage. And what began to happen, money started going out of Maryland, so they changed the usury law to 8% because interest rates were going up. And that didn't last very long, so they did away with the usury law, so that as today, there's no limit to what a bank can charge you for a home mortgage if you can afford to pay it. And then Baltimore Federal came into town with what they called a magic mortgage, and you could borrow 90% of the price of the house. Of course, when these things started to happen, if you were looking at a graph, the price of houses then started going up. And then as the interest rates started going down, they were going in opposite directions. Now, I've been retired 15 years, so I didn't see the real top of the market that my son saw, where those $15,000 and $20,000 houses that I had sold were selling for $300,000 as they are today, if you can find buyers, of course. So that's probably the biggest change that I saw personally because of my business.
Okay. And did that have any effect on your way of life or your family's way of life?
Well, it made it better because I could sell more real estate and at higher prices. And of course, my commission being 5% on the sale of a house, if the house was $20,000, I got $1,000 commission. If it was $50,000, I got a $2,500 commission. So it was good for the business. It wasn't an overnight success. It was very steady.
So then it would be fair to say that the population growth was beneficial.
Oh yes, no question about that.
Good.
You need buyers. I also did a subdivision and built houses, hiring contractors in a development called Winchester Park, beyond the hospital.
Okay.
Which is all, of course, it's full now. And when I started doing that, I think my first house that I built and sold was about $20,000 or $21,000. Today, it's a house that would bring I would say 300. I shouldn't have built any houses. I should have just kept the land. Because the lots that I was putting with the house price were $2,500 after I had put in the streets and the water and so forth. And the last lot I sold without a house, I sold for $75,000.
Okay.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. What is it that you like so much about Carroll County that has kept you here your whole life?
Family, of course. And Carroll County has a very good makeup in its population. There are a lot of very, very nice people here. Just as coming to this retirement community has been very nice because of the people that I've met.
how long have you lived here in the retirement community?
4 years. 4 years this past July.
And you do like it?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, I must add this, being incarcerated. But we can go out at night and go to... I'm kidding.
This may seem redundant, but so overall, your thoughts and your feelings and your opinions towards Carroll County in general, how would you summarize them?
Well, it's a very stable county, and has a very minimum amount of crime, which makes it a nice place to live. So I like the stability of the county, and I'm not a big city person, so Westminster and Carroll County has always suited me.
Good. And then,
with that being said, do you have any thoughts on how much Carroll County is beginning to grow outward, like population-wise? With you saying that you're not a big city person, what are your thoughts on the population in Carroll County growing, and people from outside of the county coming in to the county?
Well, I don't have any objections to that. If it's going to grow, it's going to grow. So, which it's continuing to do. I don't keep pace with the total population year to year, so I really don't know what it has reached. But probably one of the things that keeps it from growing too rapidly is that it doesn't have any large industries, which would require, of course, heavy employment.
do you have any stories to tell us of your experience living here in Carroll County that you would like to share with us?
Well, I have a pet peeve with the city of Westminster. The city of Westminster operates a business which is known as the Water and Sewer Department. And one of the things that concerns me, there's no supervision over their operations, such as a public service commission that supervises electricity companies and privately owned utilities or corporately owned utilities. So Westminster is free to pretty much do what it likes, and they've seen fit to charge people that live outside of the city of Westminster substantially higher rates for water and sewer than the people that live in the city of Westminster. Now, in my personal opinion, I think that's somewhat of an abuse of power, because no money from the taxpayers of the city goes into the operation of the Water and Sewer Department. That's always been a pet peeve of mine. About 40 years ago, another man and I, Dr. Gilligan, opposed when they were going to do that, and we went to the county commissioners and asked for where we could go for administrative relief, and it was the courts. And they agreed to intercede, and the Public Service Commission then was called in, and they created two rates by measuring the amount of mains and the operations and the number of users and so forth. And it did create a differential in rate for the outside user as opposed to the inside user. The city was supposed to report on an annual basis to the Public Service Commission, but I don't think they ever did. And that rate apparently stayed the same for many, many, many years until just recently, when they reestablished the rates with a much greater differential between the inside user and outside user.
Okay. One last question that we thought of was, has to do with changes in the school system. What changes have you seen in the schools from when you were a child to when your children were growing up?
Well, the first 4 years that I went to school in Westminster was at the West End School, and that's up near McDaniel College. Do you know where it is? It's between West Main and Pennsylvania Avenue. When I went there, there were no inside toilet facilities. There were outside privies.
Wow.
I'll say. Of course, that isn't a school any longer. It's, I think, used for senior citizen functions. Then, of course, the biggest change came when I went from West End, I went to the elementary school on East Green Street, which is now a restaurant. And at the time I went there, I never went into the brick building because they had what they called portables around the outside, and I went there the 5th and 6th grade. And then they opened the new Westminster Senior High in 1937, and I went there in the 7th through the 11th grade. So that's now the East Middle School. And of course now they've built the new, much larger high school out off of Washington Road, I believe it is. And so the biggest change I've really seen has been in the physical buildings, the plants, football fields and stadiums and things like that. So I really don't know that much about the curriculum, but I'm sure that has improved. My children and grandchildren are a lot smarter than I am.
Where did your children go to school?
All of them that went into the Westminster schools. As have my grandchildren, my 4 grandchildren.
That's awesome. Your whole family.
Well, one of the nicest things about growing old, and there aren't many, is watching your children grow up, mature, and become successful, and also watching your grandchildren get their college education and mature. I have one grandchild that's married but has no children yet. She's only been married about 1.5 years, I think. She happens to be an outside auditor for an auditing firm. She's doing very well.
Wow.
I have to get this in. She graduated from Towson University, summa cum laude.
Wow.
I tell her, I said, I don't know where you got your smarts, honey, but it wasn't for me.
Now, are you related, the Billingslea building, the professional buildings over near, back in behind Hoffman's near the hospital, is that any relation to you?
Yes, that was named after one of my father's brothers, my uncle Charles Levine Billingsley, who was a physician, and he was very instrumental in Westminster getting the hospital, and that was an honor that they bestowed on him when they built that office building. Called it the Billingslea building. The hospital owned it and operated it, but now it's been condominiumized, so the occupants now have bought the offices in there.
Right. Okay. Any other thoughts that you want to share, experiences?
Well, since you asked about the Billingsley building, and I told you about my uncle, his father, my grandfather, was also a physician in Westminster. And his father, my great-grandfather, was a physician who lived in Uniontown. And the house that he lived in and where my grandfather was born is now owned by Fred Teeter, the son of Priscilla Priscilla Teeter, who is a resident here at Carroll Lutheran Village.
Wow. What a small world. That's awesome.
Yes, it is.
Very impressive. Okay. Well, is there anything else?
Well, I watch the stock market every day, so at least I have something to do.
Yes, that will keep you busy.
That's why my investments, I don't have a pension because I was self-employed all my working years. So fortunately, I was able to not spend all of my income and invest it for the future. So as a result of that, we were able to afford Carroll Lutheran Village.
Yes. Would there be any words of wisdom that you would give to future generations of Carroll County residents, or if you want to make it specific, McDaniel students?
Well, be sure you pick a good mate. Also, I think as you start to become successful, don't spend all of your money. Make sure that you invest carefully, take advantage of things like the now I've forgotten the name of it, the retirement that everyone can invest in.
401k?
Well, that's one, yes. And the name just slips me. That's another part of getting old. You forget things. IRAs.
Oh.
I invested in the IRAs the year it started.
Wow.
Well, I couldn't resist it because it was tax deductible. So the government was actually contributing to my IRA retirement. Now, of course, that stopped when I became 70 and a half, so I've been had to draw out of it ever since. And I pay taxes on that, so that the government does recover some of the money that I was able to deduct.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing this interview for us.
My pleasure.
It was our pleasure to learn more about you and your experience here in Carroll County.